Hey, a pleasant good evening, everybody. This is Sports Fanatic News, and that is SteelFlyers, and we are here with the latest edition of the JB and Steel Show, as we're here to break down the latest and greatest around the ECHL and also the NHL, and of course, give you the latest updates on the MLB lockout. Last week we left off with the Metropolitan Division, so when we get to the NHL, we'll just skip past that and go to the other divisions, just as a heads up for everybody. If you want to check out the Metropolitan Division, that will be on last week. But please continue to hit the subscribe button here at SteelFlyers and also at Sports Fanatic News to keep the channels growing as we continue to grow and get things out there to more people around the world. And Steel, first and foremost, how are you doing before we dive into a couple ECHL teams?
Oh man, I'll tell you what, I'm doing great, feeling great. Got a lot of great things to talk about on the show. Man, can you believe we're at volume 12 already?
Yeah,
right.
Especially because we both had a couple weeks in between. We were busy.
Yeah, right. You know, we couldn't really get matched up there.
14. I think we would be at 14 if we did
something like that. Yeah, right. So we'll be good with 12, but we got some great ECHL stuff to talk about here because, of course, if you guys don't already know, Pro Joe, the great Joe Borek, JB, is the beat writer for the Reading Royals. So you got to be checking him out, man, because he is constantly on top of what's going on with that team and also the ECHL. So that's why we're going to cover some of that on the show this week, and then we're also going to be covering a bunch of other great hockey in the NHL with the trade deadline just 14 days away and all kinds of great stuff to talk about there as well, too. So, Joe, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to get into it. How are you doing, my man?
Been good. It's been fun watching the different teams as we come into the home stretch in all three different leagues between the NHL, which we talked next week, if you guys want to hear our comments on that. The ECHL, which we'll get into in a second, and the NHL, which we'll get into in about 20 minutes. But let's get into the ECHL.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's dive right in.
Came and went as I was talking there. But anyway, we'll start with the Mountain Division, as people enjoy skiing in some of the regions of where some of these teams are. But anyway, the Utah Grizzlies at 56 games have 67 points. 598 win percentage. They've been poor in their last 10 at 4-6, but overall have been a very good team. Where the ECHL website I love the most because it gives you the goals for, goals against numbers right here in front of your face.
Yeah, right.
Other sites should really implement that strategy. But their win percentage is 57.10, so pretty solid. Their problem is that you would like to get up higher is goals scored compared to your goals against. They're at 186 to 181. That's pretty tight. For being a first place team, that's why they're not. That's why I started with this division because they're the first place team. It's automatically a diamond in the rough contender for the Kelly Cup just because you're so close to that goals for, goals against in the Mountain Division. When you're the first place team, that might bite you in the butt in the postseason. Because you have to be able to lock teams down a lot more once you get to the postseason. Them scoring with Manic, Bradley, Tardif, Bowen, Tyler Penner, like they're scoring, they'll get that done. And even from the defensive end, they have one of the best defensive scorers in CED on the back end. And then they have Luke Martin, Nate Klurman, Connor McDonough. So they have solid people. Their issue has been finding the main guys like Peyton Jones, who actually Penn State product, Peyton Jones, has been okay in net for them. I really like Peyton Jones and wish him well bet. He's been solid. They just have to get one of the guys of Jones, Trent Miner, to be able to step up and be the guy that is able to just kind of carry the torch. And their defense solidifies itself a little bit more. I don't know if they're going to make any moves before the deadline, which I think is the 31st for the ECHL compared to the 21st. But it's either the 21st or the 31st that's coming up. But they have to just tighten it up a little bit and have one of those guys pull the weight in net fully. And then there'd be that team that can really compete for the Kelly Cup compared to being this diamond in the rough first place team just because of they're not tight enough on the other end of the puck, which, as we know from the NHL level, and it affects you at every level, can really bite you in the butt.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. Now, being one of the teams that has played some of the most games in the ECHL, the Grizzlies, the Utah Grizzlies, their winning percentage, yes, they are leading their division, but you know what? Here's the thing, right? So you got the Royals and you got the Walleyes are pretty much the top of the heap by a huge margin. And then you got a big giant stack of teams that are in the point 0.6 something percentile. And then you got Utah, right? And Utah is only, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of parity, not just within the Mountain Division, because the Mountain Division is very, very tight. Like there's, I mean, barely 10 hundredths of a percentage point between some of these teams. Do you know what I mean? With multiple games in hand, even still, too.
The other division is a lot more. I'm trying to, like, the other divisions, you kind of hit it on the head. That's why I would say anybody in the first three there are more of the dark horse contender teams, more so the first two, but because their division just isn't as
competitive
as some of the ones. So, like, that plays into it as well, where we've seen in hockey many teams come out of weaker divisions and still win. So that's why I'm going to give them the credit and benefit of the doubt. One of their goalies, Garrett Melkoff's been with the Phantoms as a guy that's been around their team, so
right.
They haven't had him here for a while. But I think they're a team that has a chance. But another team in their division that's been the most interesting of late isn't even them. It's Rapid City, who's been great in their last 10 at 7-1-0-2.
Right.
Who are at a 579, which is not all too far behind the Grizzlies. And then
barely, like they're barely and they played one more game.
Yeah, their issue though is the same. It's you score enough, you just don't lock down enough because 186 to 189, and that's what I kind of was getting at the beginning. That's kind of the telltale with this division, where like 186 to 179. 50.90 win percentage would probably be much higher if you could lock down a little bit better. And it comes to the same thing. Scoring, Logan Nelson's a beast. Bilas is a beast. They have three guys above 40 points on the forward core. A beast. Wow. And then Coda has 39. Butcher has 37, 36 for Gravel, and then the list goes on. Wow. For defense, they have Helgeson is pretty good. Zulsdorf, who's pretty good. But then beyond that, they have solid guys in Harrison and Fryer, but they're a team that they should add. If they can add somebody that's defensive, that's just a lockdown ECHL defenseman at the deadline, that might even make them be above Utah just because they're trending up. If Utah doesn't start picking it up again, that might them be more the shocker team, like how you were saying about the Stars in the NHL a couple of years ago, that they would kind of be at that sector of being a surprise team, because the difference is they have had someone that's taken the torch in net compared to the Grizzlies, which is Lucas Park in 24 games, has had a 921 and a 253. So that's also the difference between those two teams. If they can tighten up their defense, because I would hand that to the Utah Grizzlies right now, then I would say that they would be potentially even a team that I would give the nod to before the Grizzlies, even though they're second in their division in terms of Kelly Cup contention.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. Okay. Well, so now, even though, because I'm assuming that what the ECHL is going to do is the same thing what the NHL and all the other leagues do, is that your division leaders are your top four seeds, correct?
Well, it's top three, and then you have a wild card.
Okay, so top three. So they only allow 6 in?
Well, the NHL is the top three, and then the wild card.
Okay, so what's the ECHL?
I think the ECHL is just the top three from what I understood, because there's less teams. There's not as many teams in the ECHL as there is in the NHL. There's, I believe, 27 teams. So
13 and 14 is 27.
Yeah, there's 27. Yeah, there's 27 teams. So I think it's just the top
three from each conference.
No, division. No, division. I think
top 3 from each division. All right, I got you. So that means that right now they're the Grizzlies, the Rush, and the Steelheads are in the running for the Mountain Division then, right?
We get 12, because 3, 6, 9, 12. With the Steelheads, meh.
Yeah, right. Because they're 29, 23, and 2.
Yeah.
They're 5s across the board.
The Steelheads would have to be the Canadians, where nobody in their right mind sees them getting to the cup. The difference between the Steelheads, though, is I will give them this. They might be better defensively than the Grizzlies and Rapid City, because they've only gave up 141 goals and actually have a really good defense. They also only scored compared to the other two teams being in the 180s. So their team is probably more sound on the defensive end of the puck, but they're kind of the opposite. Behind the McBrides, Browns, and Whites of the world, do they have enough when the playoffs come offensive punch to be able to get them over the hump? Because they do got the goaltending. They actually have 2 guys in Kupski and Colton Point that are playing great compared to only one for Rapid City and one that's kind of picking it up for Utah, like we said. So I think for them, they got the defense with Brady, Steve, Johnson, and then Versteeg and others. It's now, can you push a little bit more offensively? So that, even though I don't think they're a team that can contend for the Kelly Cup just because they don't have it, they're not fully there yet. That's something I do have to point out for them to give them the benefit of the doubt, because the other two teams are more offensive that don't have enough defense. This team is more defensive that could use a little bit more goal scoring. Right. Where that might even play better to being contending in the playoffs, because you can win more,
especially defensively,
2-1 ugly games in the postseason. So they will be an interesting team to follow that premise.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, and they are 3-6-1 in their last 10 games, and that's not really boding well. That's not trending in the upper direction. You know what I mean? As far as trying to come down the stretch here and trying to put games together, they do have 1 game in hand to the Grizzlies and 2 games in hand to the Rush, but still, you need to win those games in hand, and they don't seem like they are. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, for that division, like we said, we had the Grizzlies, Rush, and Steelheads that are in the top 3. The only team that's been good in the last 10 was Rapid City. We're moved now to a division that even had a team all the way down at 5th in the Central that have been hot in their last 10. In the Iowa Heartlanders, we're not going to talk about them because they're 5th, but they have been hot in their last 10, 7-game winning streak. And have the Wheeling Nailers at 7-3, the Fort Wayne Comets at 2nd in the division that have been 6-3-1 in their last 10, and then Toledo, who not so much against Reading, but against other teams, have been good and have been 7-3 in their last 10. Reading did sweep them in Toledo.
Did they? Okay.
Not this past weekend, but the weekend prior. We'll start reverse this one, 1-3 and then 3-1 in this one. So when it comes to the Wheeling Nailers, who I've seen the Royals play a bunch of times, they're at the 56-90 win percentage. They have been a pretty solid team defensively, allowed 166 goals, scored 180. They have Walt Ling, Kenny Hausinger's brother, Cam Hausinger, Almeida, who's absolutely disgusting. And then they just kind of get the net scoring from the Cockroach.
Yeah.
So they after that, they get the depth. On defense, they have guys that Maniscalco and Smith that will stand up to anybody. McPherson, David Drake they got from the Royals, who's just a very sound defensive defenseman that the Flyers drafted years ago in the 7th round.
I remember that name.
Is a guy that is really solid in net and really in tuned in net. So they're a team, even though they're in 3rd place, I would say they have a better chance probably in terms of Kelly Cup contention than any of the teams in the Mountain, just because of division competition.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And, look, when I look at this division, I look at this breakdown here, okay? I look at a team like, and you obviously, you can't not look at the Toledo Walleyes and go, wow, okay, yeah. But then, like with what you were talking about with the Nailers, right? They have 180 goals for, right? And they only have 166 goals against. That's actually not too bad, all things considered, in this league, in this division, in this, you know what I mean, when you break it down, right? Because then you look at like what the Comets are doing. They got 192 goals for and 167 goals against.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about. I would say the Comets are probably kind of what I consider especially if they get going again, but I still consider just from the rest of the team, if they had centers, the Wild in the NHL. Because if they can get the goaltending, they have the defense. They just need the center depth.
Yeah.
They don't need the Comets don't need that. But I'm saying from the perspective, they're that dark horse team that I think can win it. Where I said that when I had Frederick on my channel, if you want to check that out, when I had him on to talk about the Wild on Sports Fanatic News. But they have the best offensive defenseman in Will Grabber.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
On the season. Then they have a guy, by the way, that has 34 points and 32 points behind him. So from their defense, you're going to have pressure offensively. And then they have Petruzzelli, who's one of the best players in the ECHL. Kellen Jones, who's one of the probably top 10 somewhere players in the ECHL. And then Boudreaux, who's good as well. And then in net, even their backup, Kulina, has been very good. And then Samuel Harvey's been one of the most sound netminders in the league. So,
Nice.
Third team, they score. In terms of offense, if you want to watch a team that's potent, that's a really fun offensive system, you want to watch on Flow Hockey the Fort Wayne Comets. They might not.
With you.
The difference is they also have been very good. 171 for 210 is not too bad on the penalty kill. That's actually an 81%. The thing with Fort Wayne that's a little bit surprising is a 22 power play percentage for the offensive power they have. But
right.
Otherwise, they're a very good team that I think really has a pretty good chance, especially because their defense probably is underrated how they can do it defensively just because of how good they are offensively. Nobody talks about how they actually are good, pretty darn good defensively as well.
Right. I'm with you. And now we actually have to talk about the top ranked team. And this is exactly just that, the top ranked team. At 51 games played, they're 35-13-1 at 0.716 percentile. And the Walleyes, man, 7-3-0 in their last 10 games. And they have a sick number of goals for at 194 with a goals against of 145, one of the lowest in the league. So not only are they putting up a bunch of points per game, what are they at, like 3.275 or something crazy like that? Yeah, right. And then they're not letting in a lot of goals. So they're getting it done defensively, and they're also getting the goaltending as well too. So
yeah, well, they have a guy that's been in the ECHL for a few years now, Billy Christopoulos, who I want to say went to Air Force, but he went to one of the academies, and he's been great ever since coming out, and he's consistently won goalie of the week, goalies of the month. So he's been one of the better goalies in the league. This year he has a 915 and a 265.
wow.
And also Caden been a very good young goaltender for them. With a 215 and a 918. So
wow, that's not bad at all, man. For both of those goalies, that's really pretty good.
And then they also have Cole Frazier, who they have a great defense, but on top of having the great defense, they got Gazzola, who's good at net, or not good at, who's great on defense, Meyer, who's great on defense, Ghaffari, Lowney, Martinet, who's a very good defensive defenseman who will also be physical when he has to. They're kind of like the Reading, honestly, in a sense of where Kirk McDonald says we have too many defensemen to play too many minutes. That's the same with Toledo. You have too many guys. You have to sit somebody that really would not be sitting on a bunch of other teams. That's pretty much where Toledo's at. Where
that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, then they added a Cole Frazier who's at 100 penalty minutes because he's an old school defensive defenseman that will also beat the living crap out of anybody with tangent. There's that. So on top of that, Hensick's one of the best offensive players in the league. Barry Hawkins, they're by far one of the top contenders for the Kelly Cup.
Yeah, that's. I mean, with
So for
with
either probably the top contender, as much as I hate to say it as a fan of the Royals, but the Royals are
well,
probably the
right,
second
right.
contender right now if you're looking at things in terms of odds.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. But they seem to have the team. They seem to have the goaltending. They seem to have the defense. You know what I mean? They definitely have the offense. So I mean, with only 51 games played, they're only 2 games ahead of Reading, and they're at 35, 13, and 1. You know what I mean? So that to me is right now. I would have to agree. They would probably be in the top contention for the cup for as far as that's concerned. Yeah, I would have to go with that. So, and with that said, we're gonna move. Say that again.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, yeah, I think you were going to move on to the same thing.
Yep.
Which is the next division, where another team that's been probably, if they were in another division, like for example, I hate picking on the Mountain Division as much as we have today, but the Mountain Division, the Florida Everblades would even be a better team than they are because the South has a 34, 30, 31, and then 28 win team. So
Yeah.
put there, where the Everblades, who were in third in their division, have a 31-17 record and a 55.40 win percentage, and also have been very good on both ends, 186 to 145. When it comes to the Everblades, they also have been when it comes to Cahagan, they've been very good in net. Thomas Vermaca has been. So if you can have, but again, like I said with Utah, have one guy just take you, that can work in the postseason.
Yeah, exactly.
McLaughlin's amazing. Masella, Bouchard, McRae, they're top defensemen for their team. Winecki's one of the most fun offensive players to watch. You can pass it or score, so you never really know what the heck he's going to do. There's some guys that are more one-sided. McCarron's the same way, and so is Pendenza, where that's why the Everblades are a really dangerous team because they have so many guys that have over 20 goals, but also have over 30 assists. So it's like, well, what the heck is he doing here? Is he going to think shoot first on this player? Is he going to think just said something over here? So that's why I think they're a team. This South Division, all top 3 of their teams are probably all at least top 6 Kelly Cup contenders, if not top 5, just because of how ridiculous when you look at that South Division. It is.
Well, first of all, the Everblades, look, they are one of the teams that have played the most games. But even still at playing 56 games, they still are 31, 17, and 4, right? But here's the really sick part about this, right? If you look at these 3 teams, the top 3 teams in the South, right? So you got, excuse me, the Everblades with 186 goals against 145, one of the lowest in the league, right? They have 31, 17, and 4 with 56 games played. Then you look at the Jacksonville Icemen. They have 51 games played, so they've got 4 or 5 less games. They have 30 wins, 17 losses. Oh, there's that number again. And 2 overtime losses with a 0.627%. They have 146 goals for and the lowest in the league of goals against for 124. I mean, and all 3 of these teams all have 17 losses. All 3 of these teams, with the exception of the Icemen, because they have way less games, right? They're all within a point or 2 of each other, right? The Blades are 70 points, and the Gladiators are at 72, right? You know what I mean? So it just seems like it's the tale of 3 teams here in the South. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? And either one of these 3 teams, I think, could be contenders, just like you said, Joe, because they all have a very balanced team. They all seem like they have what's going on. You know what I mean?
Well, the Icemen they're great. The Icemen are really a really on steroids version of what I was saying about the Steelheads, where the Steelheads are the best in a weak division at being a defensive team that can defend the puck, that if they can get the offense going, will be in good shape. Where the Icemen are in a strong division, that their defense has been great. They've been good in net, but I mean, having 146 goals at this point of the season as a team total is also not the sexiest thing. Where you do have 10 shorthanded goals, so that's fantastic, and you have an 85% penalty kill, which is great for the play.
Wow.
But when it comes to your scoring, if your name's not Craig Martin, where is it consistently coming from? Because he has 41 points, then it drops to 24, 23, 22, 21. So it's more about like where are we getting that from? And then on the back end, they don't have the more push the offense pace. That's not their style. They have 14, 14, and 9 as the top points for Bozola, Fortunato, and Vroby back there. But in net, they're set with Charles Williams has been good in net, and so has Francois Broussard. So I think they're set there. If they can just have somebody, whether it's Horachuk, Elmer, Lynch, Vladislav, Mikhalchuk, somebody kind of just catch fire and lightning in a bottle, so it's not Craig carrying the entire offensive weight.
Yeah,
that's really what the Ice team is. They're by far one of the most skilled defensive teams in the league, as you said. It's about now having enough offense to compete with that defense. But I give them all the credit in the world because they're playing exactly how they should for the team they have.
Exactly.
But now you have to get more offense to contend for the Kelly.
You need to have that depth scoring. You know what I mean? You need and if you're not able to produce that from within, guys moving around the lineup, you need to get it from the back end. You know what I mean? And with 14, 14, 14, and 9, that's not really getting it done on the back end as far as points production is concerned for them. But you know what? I do agree with what you're saying, though, because I would much prefer my defensive guys playing defense. The only thing that they seem to be missing is exactly what you said. They need some depth scoring. So with that being said...
I don't mind if guys go up on the play if they don't get caught. I think it's smart to have defensemen jump up on the play. Right. I just think they have to be defensemen like Chris, like the Latangs of their league, whether it's obviously nobody at the ECHL is Chris Letang, they'd be at the NHL. But they have to be the guy, the offensive equivalent for the ECHL that scores 70 a season points down there, but isn't a full bull ridiculous guy to make it all the way up to the NHL. Right. Where you're going to let those guys jump up as much as they want, because that's obviously the makings of what your team's able to do. If you have guys like we talked about, where the Walleye are able to have multitudes of guys, the Comets are able to have some guys, those teams, you would want guys that are good to be able. But if you're a team like them, you don't want that, because it's like asking guys like the Justin Brauns of the world, or the Adam Larsons of the world, or the Slavin can play offense a little bit, the Pesci's of the world, to keep jumping up on the play when they are fine offensively. A couple of those guys, but they're not the. That's not their game. Their game is to just really shut down people and then make the pass up the. But off that tangent, the Atlanta Gladiators are a quick team to go over, just because of how solid they've been. They've kept Atlanta hockey relevant. Also, they've also been a very good goals against team, all the way down at 139. But unlike Jacksonville, they have 171 goals for, which really helps them. And a great PK at 82%, and have scored 18 short-handed goals. So if you go on the power play against the Gladiators, you might be scoring goals. So
that's usually not a good thing. Yeah. If you're going on the power play and you get scored on, what?
But Cameron Keeley, Mike Pellich, Derek Nesbitt, let's call him the other Nesbitt, Cody Sylvester. They're a team that's been loaded, and down there, that's why some people are part of the mantra of there could be a team if they made it work better in Atlanta, because they do show up for the Gladiators. It's just it didn't work with the Thrashers, and there's multitudes of reasons we don't have time to explain.
Right.
The Tapatas, he's great. And then in net, you don't need to worry about anything when you have a Murdaka or a Chris Neal in net, because they have a very good combination. So they're I think, probably they're definitely, I would say, in the top 5, which is why I said earlier, when it comes to South Division, you might have all three of those teams in the top five, but somebody, I think the Icemen, even though the Everblades are below them, might by default fall to six
Right.
just because you need to have offense to win in the postseason. You can't just be all defensive. But
No, I'm with you.
that's
No, I'm
something.
with you. Yeah.
It's fun to see because it's a remedy of what we said last week with the AHL. There's a lot of different teams here. All three in the South Division can be top contenders. The Walleye and Comets are definitely a top contender. And then when it comes to the Nailers and Rapid City, they're kind of the sleeper with the Grizzlies as like a maybe diamond in the rough
Exactly.
team. But now we wrap up with the division the Reading Royals are in, the local area team. Trois Rivières, which is an accomplishment for their first season right now, has stayed in third. The team out of Trois Rivières, Quebec, with an exactly 50% win percentage with the 23-19, and then the other records when it comes to the overtime and shootout losses and all that. But they're exactly even at 163 to 163 in goals scored and goals against. Their PK is not the best of late. It dropped all the way down to 76%. But Archambault, Nellis, they're very good offensively. Defense-wise, they can be one of those pain-in-the-butt teams that tries to chip at you because they're another team that ain't giving you any offense really from the back end.
Right.
But they're trying to chip and be that gritty team, The Rosiers and Pagliarello have been solid. That's the thing. They've had solid net minding. Most of these other teams you talked about had one guy that has been really good, minus the Grizzlies haven't had anybody that has ascended yet. So they're a team that kind of falls into that category where you need to have, like, the Rosiers is their number one because it's 22 to 10 games. But I need him to be a little bit sharper than he has 14 wins in those games, but that's because his team's played like a 900, a 312. I've watched some of the games where he has some weaknesses, letting in weak blocker or glove side goals. He has to tighten up. If he does that, because otherwise, when he's on, he's one of those goalies that's a kind of coaster of a guy at times. If they can get him more consistent, then they could be set. But I would say that's a little bit what worries me, the inconsistency in net. Where, in contrast, the second place team in our division, when it comes to the Newfoundland Growlers, they have the exact opposite. Keith Petrozelli is one of the best netminders. When he's gone up a little bit, so that's why Cormier's had to play 24 games. But even his save percentage hasn't been the best. But Cormier, I was at the one game, he went off against the Royals, and it was a battle to the. And I've watched other games this year again, Adirondack or other teams where he's battled. His save percentage isn't the best, but a 297 goals against. He's one of those guys that's still ascending, has his moments of flaws, but then really shines. I actually really like him. And Petrozelli's been great in 19 games, a 931. So I think when the push comes to shove, Newfoundland, they're the team that always has the most AHL contracts, usually above 10. They have very good depth on their team. And they also have a very, very good defense, 132 goals against to 177 scored. So they're going to shut you down and try to jam you in the neutral zone with the Hoffenmeyers, Petroniros of the world, the Kelpchucks of the world. So I think and Gordy Green's a tough, you-know-what, and also can score. Marcus Power, Oren Santanzo, Jeremy McKenna-Skirvin, Sinzolski. So I think they're a team that I actually thought would be a little bit like they're still kind of on the Royals' tail at this point, but I think it's going to be even closer to the end because they are a really good team where Newfoundland's great defensively, very good offensively. They're just not to a full effect level of where the Royals are in terms of maybe team completeness when it comes to having the guys that, like, we have the DeChars, the Lowe's that are really those playoff style guys, but they do, like I said, have the Green and other guys that can do it. So I think they're a team that would be a top contender where at this point I would say, just to close off with the ECHL with the Royals and that, I would say if we did a top five, it would go Toledo, Reading, we would have to do Gladiators, and I would say then Growlers, and Everblades as the top 5, because the Icemen I would like to put up there because of their defense, but you gotta have the defense with the Comets, and I think would come right 6, because I love their offense and how they can push the pace offensively from their defense. And I think their defense has more defensively. It's just not talked about enough. But I still have to see it in the playoffs.
I'm with you.
To be able to put at the top.
So I have a couple quick questions here for you here, man. For one, it seems or it appears that the North has played the significant lower number of games compared to, say, the South, where most of those guys are in the 50s or mid or upper 50s. The Central are in the, lower to mid 50s, and then the Mountain is up in the upper 50s.
Yeah, if I think I know what you're going to ask, it's because of regional guidelines.
Oh, okay, all right, because they significantly have less games played in the South or in the North. I'm sorry, excuse me, have less games played in the North than in all the other divisions. And so when you project out, I mean, when you look at the Royals, they have goals for 179 and goals against 144. That's really good. And the Growlers are at 177 and 132. I mean, both of them are 7-3-0 or 7-2-1 in their last 10 games. And then when you look at, like, say, the Growlers and the Gladiators, I mean, it's almost exactly the same team, and there's 8-game difference. Do you know what I mean? Oh. So you would have to project the Growlers and even the Reading Royals. You would have to project them much higher, with a much better win percentage, much better points, things of that nature, just because of looking at, you know what I mean? Because, like, Reading is 30-12, you know what I mean? And then, and they've played so many less games, and you project out another 8 games.
Yeah. They could be at 36 wins instead of the 34.
Right, or whatever.
But I get it. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, where I think that's why they change it to the points percentage and why there's going to be so much in both leagues. Talked about the AHL and ECHL this week, AHL last week. So much all top 6 teams, or even maybe lower, top 7 or lower, are going to be able to even fight and have great series.
Exactly.
Just because of you didn't play the same game. That's why they had to change it. So you have to think this team might have even been to that team's win total if they played those other 7 games, or 5 or 4 or 3 or whatever it was, if they're only a couple wins behind them.
Exactly. So I'm with you on that. Well, man, I'll tell you what, I have to agree with you on that. I wouldn't change the top 5 that you put out there. I kind of like that top 5, but I wanted to point that out, though, about the North Division, is that because they have significantly less games played. So until they either catch up or whatever the case is, there's going to be some moving going on here, I think, for sure, in the North, where you might see some of those northern teams take over from the southern teams, the division or that conference. You know what I mean? To where they might have the better.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. But you get what I'm saying, though. So.
I completely agree with that. I mean, that's a very good observation to end on, because those teams might be exactly where those teams are at when those game totals, if they are able to make them up. But if not, you have to keep that in your head for, well, they might even be better than their projected percentages. And all
exactly.
Because they haven't played the same.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to point that out, though. You know what I mean?
And now we can move from the potential future guys of the NHL for some of these guys to moving into the NHL, where last week we talked about Metropolitan, who has Carolina, the Rangers, and Pittsburgh, which it still was last week, as the top 3 teams in the division. So we're going to move past that, and since we started with the East last week, let's go to the West. We'll go to the Pacific Division and talk about the fact that the top teams are Calgary, the very surprised team of the LA Kings, and the Vegas Golden Knights, who are teetering. And then you have the wild card, which is right now Dallas and Nashville, with Edmonton, that's just 2 points, 2 points below, and a .571 to a .6 of the Nashville Predators and a .609 percentage of the Dallas Stars for the wild card. This division, I think, shaped out a lot differently than some people thought. I mean, the Ducks have fallen off a lot more than I thought they were going to. I thought they would fall off some, but they've sunk way below. And the Stars have risen more than I thought they were going to this year. This seemed like a kind of dead year for them, and now they've started to make up and actually do really well of late. And then Nashville stayed as being a competitive playoff team. But the fact of Calgary being number one, I think most people would have had Vegas probably at number one coming in. I don't think anybody would have had the Kings at the top three, and the Kings are in a pretty good spot right now in the top three and have continued to get better as the season's gone on, just on the ice and by all the numbers and everything. And the same goes for the Calgary Flames, who have hit bumps but then have come back and have been one of the best differential teams, have been very good in home and away born. So I think this division's been the biggest surprise division in the league. And that's exciting, though, and a good thing to have for the league in general.
Obviously, when you have parity and you have teams that were not expected to be in places where they were not expected to be, you know what I mean? I don't think anybody had any questions or doubts about where Seattle was going to be. I don't think anybody had questions or doubt about where potentially San Jose might have been. Maybe even Vancouver, too. I mean, Vancouver has made some moves and got a good boost from the hiring of Bruce Boudreau, but they were never going to be that team anyway. They were never going to be that much more than 500 team anyhow, and wasn't really counting on them. What I really felt was going to happen in this division was the California teams were going to be fighting with Vegas and either Calgary and Edmonton for those middle sections. Because I really felt that Anaheim was going to step it up, and they looked really good at the beginning, like half of the season, right? Gibson was playing great, and and they had some streaks going, and they were doing great, you know, and then they just kind of, I mean, 27, 22, and 9. That's, I mean, they're 4-6-0 in their last 10 games. So yeah, the tires have kind of fallen off, and the spaceship has kind of landed in reality there for Anaheim. But Edmonton too, the same thing with Edmonton, right? Like they had a major nosedive, right? And they had dropped all the way down to like 7th in the division, right? So amazingly, they fire their coach, hire a new coach. They're now 5-4-1 in their last 10 games, and bang, they're in 4th place. I mean, you know, hey, look at that. It's amazing what a couple wins can do for you. Was not really that surprised by LA being where they were. They are one of those teams that have drafted well, have really good prospects coming up through, and have just been able to continually rotate those guys out on the ice and continually put a good product out there. Now, they haven't been relevant that much in the last couple of years, but I think they're destined to be a relevant team this year, for sure. And then obviously with Calgary, I mean, you have to look at Jacob Markstrom as being the one of the leading contenders for a Vezina, one of the main reasons why this team is playing as well as they have been, why they've gone on the streaks that they're on, why they're one of the league leadings plus 57 differential. I mean, come on, the guy's got 8 shutouts on the year. You know what I'm saying? I'm a little bit shocked by where Calgary is, but I'm not surprised. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, they formed a good team. I mean, they have, on paper, it's just Gaudreau this year has really come back to being.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Fair. That's exceptionally helped them. And also, at the same time, they still haven't had great play from Sean Monahan, and that hasn't hurt them to the degree it's hurt them in past seasons.
True.
So you've had other guys like Mangiapane step up that's counterbalanced Monahan when he's been healthy.
Exactly.
Not playing as you would like him to play. So I think their team, when it comes to Markstrom, I agree, he's definitely a top Vezina candidate. And even Vladar's developed himself.
Yeah, not bad at all.
And their defense is sharp too. Maybe they're at one person, but Branson has come in and fit like a glove as a good shot blocking physical guy with Storov. That doesn't seem like a line that would work, but somehow it does. And then Shilington and that works well together. And Hannafin and Anderson is one of the better lines in hockey. So I think they got a team that's very well put together. If they look to add, it wouldn't surprise me if it's maybe like a depth, one of those guys that has more experience in the playoffs forwards, like those guys, or defensemen that you can bring in that just have been there, done that, because you don't need those types of guys like a Chara of the world to play every night.
Yeah, you just need him to be. Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. I never even thought of that.
Or like somebody like that just brings in the Stanley Cup playoffs, been all the way to the Cup and won it vibes, and somebody like a Chara or any other player that's done that. If you want to, the Kings are still, I don't know if they're going to move, but like if you want to get from the Ducks, if somehow they will move Ryan Getzlaf, well, Ryan Getzlaf's a player that'll still help you, but also has won if they eat some of that money. But like there's different guys that have won that are not the same they used to be, but are also still guys that can be very valuable to your team.
Well, you have to get a guy that's going to be a Daryl Sutter guy. So he's not going to bring in a guy that's not going to fit into his system. So if any one of those two guys is going to fit into his system, then I don't see a problem with them trying to go out there and get that particular player. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why. Go ahead.
Kings, though, just because I know we're moving a little bit slower than we usually like to do again on this one like we did last week. The Flames are a surprise team that now I think have put themselves, I don't know if you would agree with this, but definitely in the cup contender category. Not maybe a top cup contender, but like in the category of being in the top five.
So like,
there's probably
so all right, okay. So like, what we do this on Off the Wall Hockey, okay? We do our top shelf power rankings every week, and we pick the top 5 best teams in the league. And right now, Calgary comes in at number 6. Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, Calgary is in the pot. Stir that around, because you put in those. I mean, not in the top 5 just yet, but sniffing at the door, right? Because they're only, let me see, 4 points back of the Rangers. Right, the Rangers have 77 and Calgary has 73. The Rangers are .688 win percentage and Calgary is .676 percentage. Okay, Calgary has 2 less games played and 3 less wins on the season. So Calgary, I would say, number 6. But they're ahead of Pittsburgh, ahead of Toronto, ahead of St. Louis, ahead of Boston, right? So not shocked, but surprised slightly. Knew that Calgary was going to be a good team, but a little shocked at being how good they are right now.
That's also why adding a Coleman is a big addition because he's been in winning experiences. Lucic this season is the most valuable he's ever been to a team since he's been on the road because he's been in Stanley Cup situations where his stats are stats, but what he brings in the locker room in a season where you're a team that has a lot of guys that are new to the feeling of, oh my God, we're the best team in the division. and we're now heading into the playoffs as a team that is in some people's eyes a good team that has a chance to get there and surprise in the Western Conference and be a team that gets to the Cup. How do I react? So you have guys like Lucic in the locker room that have been around that really settle it down. That's why I think to the next team we're moving to in the LA Kings, they're in the category of, they're not a top cup contender by any stretch, but they're in the category of don't overlook the LA Kings because they have the young guys that are coming up, plus the guys that have already won, like the Drew Dowdys, the Anze Kopitars, the Dustin Brown, that are going to guide those guys along as you get through the playoffs. And Quick, by the way, he's their Stanley Cup winning goaltender. Hold on real quick. Jonathan Quick. So again, biased, but he's been doing really good this year.
Oh man, what a great year he's having.
Figured it out too when he got off to a really slow start. So that's good for them to have two guys now. And Anderson and Doughty, when that pair's together, continues to be, just because Drew Doughty doesn't produce not many guys produce at the level of getting paid $11 million. But he still has paired very well with Anderson, and that line has been a very good line. Mata has been very good. Durzee's been amazing since he's come up.
Yeah.
You have everything together, and as you said, Byfield's now played 17 games. They've had Runstrom, who hasn't fit in with the Maple Leafs, another organization fits in there. Kaliev's good. Brandon Lemieux pisses every other organization off, but the Kings tend to like him so he can piss off every other organization and not them, except for when he gets suspended. But so I think they have a good form and also a perfect playoff team. Who's the Lemieux, the Browns, big guys like Byfield. Those are perfect players you want to have for the postseason as well, because they can kind of move through you as well and kind of hit you around a little bit to throw you off your gear. Plus, they have Alexander Edler when he's healthy, who's obviously also had experience and much experience in the postseason as well. So.
I'm with you on that. Now, look, the only thing I would say is this. If it wouldn't have been for all the man games that Vegas has lost because of injury, okay, thank you. At 32, 21, and 4, 57 games played, I think Vegas is the better team here, okay, in the group. All right, all day long. However, I think that Calgary is good enough to beat all the teams below them. Kings, Vegas, Edmonton. Okay? So is Vegas the favorite? Probably. Could LA be a tough team to play in the playoffs? Yeah. But I really still think that Calgary is the top of the heap here in the Pacific.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about Vegas, though, too, because I agree. That's why, similar to even though the Wild were sinking, just because of the way they've been able to have that feel of having the great leadership and the great, no matter what, they're going to kind of just rise back up the mountain. That's why I consider them to be the dark horse, where Vegas has the star power the Wild don't have.
Exactly.
That's why I would say and I don't know if you and John had them in the top 5, but they probably would still be for the playoffs, potentially in your top 5 for the Cup, because if everybody comes back at the right time, they're as dangerous as any team in the Western Conference.
Oh, yeah, without question. And the fact that they have remained third throughout.
With all those issues.
So there you go, right? So that's why you have to you can't not look at Vegas and go, ooh, man, if they suddenly started getting these guys back, because they're only 5 points back from Calgary, 1 point back from LA, you know what I mean? So I don't have a problem seeing Vegas getting some of these guys back and suddenly being more of the leader of the Pacific, you know what I mean? But Calgary has positioned themselves in a very good position to make the playoffs this year and be a difficult team to play. And I still think that Calgary is good enough to beat the teams below them, LA and Vegas included.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I just think Vegas is definitely, I agree with you from the standpoint of, if they were healthier, they probably could have. It could have been a different season for them as well. And also, we have to point out, like we did in ECHL, Calgary has 3 less games than the Kings and the Vegas Golden Knights, so they could win all 3 of those games, and that really helps them out as well.
If you win the games in hand.
Yeah, when it comes to now the West and the Central, they have the team I brought up that I believe is one of the bigger dark horses, which is the Minnesota Wild, because they're very sound defensively. In net, they could be a little bit more consistent, but I like Kokkonen as a young goaltender,
I do
and
too,
then Cam Talbot has his flaws, but is a good average to like a good steady offense or starting goaltender.
Yep.
That's in the league, and if you have the team, the defense like the Wild are around him, that can work out fine. That's why I kind of label them in the dark horse, because my thing with them is, like I said, for some ECHL teams that we mentioned, will they get enough offense once the playoffs come push to shove? Because that first line's been great with Hartman, Kaprizov, Zuccarello. Fiala's been great, but below that, you've had good chip-in stuff from Goudreau's, Greenway when healthy offensively, who I think he might be the secret weapon in the playoffs, because Jordan Greenway at 6'6", 225 is the perfect playoff hockey player, where he also is a guy that a lot of people think, including myself, has more offense than he's shown you. Where if he can be one of those guys that just goes ballistic in the postseason, that's going to even give you a more carrying rate, because you also have Marcus Foligno, who does that at a very good level already. So I think this team is very well put together. I wouldn't be surprised, though, obviously, center market, but if they were able to get a really good deal for a goaltender, since I wouldn't be shocked if they do it, and then just if they even move Kokkonen into that deal, because we have to remember they got Jesper Wallstedt, who's one of the best goalie prospects coming up their pipe. So if they move Kokkonen to go get Fleury or do so, they don't really need Kokkonen, because he's not he's probably not the guy they envision as their future starter, who's now 25 years old. Somebody else can have him as their starter, and then they're going to have.
Yeah. So I'm with you. But you mentioned another team at the top of the part here. We were talking about the NHL. That was Dallas, and then I think you also mentioned Nashville too. Look, these three teams, Minnesota, Dallas, and Nashville, are all like on top of each other. Okay. Minnesota has 54, Dallas has 55, Nashville has 55 games. 32 wins, 31 wins. 19 losses, 20 losses, 20 losses. 67 points, 66 points. You know what I'm saying? So at any point in time, we've seen Nashville play well. We've seen Dallas play well. We've also seen Minnesota play well. We've also seen all three of these teams have benders where, hey, what? You're losing to who? You know what I mean? Right? So this is where I think is going to be the meat of this division right here, is the Nashville, Dallas, Minnesota. And as long as St. Louis can keep winning and Colorado can keep winning, they can stay head shoulders above those guys and let those lower teams fight for the scraps, as it were, basically, because I think that's what's going to end up happening. Because I think you'll see like Minnesota, Dallas, and Nashville push out maybe any of the other teams from like the Pacific. Do you know what I mean? Because I think St. Louis, or I think Minnesota, Dallas, and Nashville are maybe better than Vegas, maybe better than LA. You know what I mean? Maybe better than Edmonton. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I think my issue with the Preds is, I think to their system, to the players they have, it's smart that they push the offensive pace more this year. It's now, are you going to be able to play enough defense for the postseason?
Yeah, right.
That's where, like, usually Soros has been great, but a goalie can only stand on his head so much.
That's right.
So you still got to be able to, if you're not the Yossi Fabro line, be able to consistently defend. Where I really like Matt Benning as a defenseman a lot. I think he's a good guy, even for the Flyers to bring in cheap this offseason as a cheap righty. But he's been up and down this year. So you need to still find more consistency from your team. Myers has only played 25 games. Borwacki's a veteran, but not a steady Eddie, always like in the lineup starter veteran. He's more of a guy that you like on your third pairing and could even be an extra if he was on some team like the Vegas Golden Knights or Tampa Bay or even LA. So like that's why I think I like their team in terms of their offense. I also think the Michael McCarron Luff line with Tomasino as a good playoff line, plus Trennan, Sissons, and Janot. That size will be good for the playoffs. My question with them is similar to what we said about Dallas a couple of years ago. Will they score enough in the playoffs? And that's still kind of my question. Speaking of Dallas, that's still a little bit of my question when it comes to Dallas. I love the goaltending. I love the defense. I love Jason Robertson. But, like, are we going to get enough, and are you going to turn into the Stanley Cup running Dallas Stars where all of a sudden you figured out and flipped the light bulb, and you're like, oh, wait, I can score. Oh, my God, my shot is amazing. And
Right.
then you score. Where that first line, absolutely amazing, with Hintz, Pavelski, Robertson, and then Ben, Seguin, and Gurianov is a solid line.
Man.
And then when you fall below that, though, then you're not seeing much scoring. So, like, you're going to have to get very good chippy defensive play from those lines, and then be able to have the great goaltending from Ottinger or Holtby, who, again, Holtby's a great guy to have for your locker room in this situation. He's been in a winning environment. And same with Suter. So I think you have the right things in place. It's just, is this their year, or is it more maybe as guys continue to grow in the Robertson, the Hinches of the world? You got Gurianov still. You got a Riley Tufte, who only has played a couple games, who's come up, and maybe he can develop into more of a steady third liner for you. Because I think Ottinger is going to be a very good goalie in this league for a while once they give him the full torch.
Right.
Where I don't know if this is the year for Dallas. This is more of the year for, sure, we can say they're a surprise team, but I don't know if they're more than, like, in terms of if they make it surprise again. But I don't know if Nashville and Dallas have been more than that, because Nashville was even higher at a certain point this year and then kind of fell. That's why they're now in the wild card race instead of being still in a better spot in the division. So
I'm with you. Now, here's the other thing, though, too. St. Louis, although they still have the same number of wins, 32, as all of the other teams, Minnesota and Dallas, all three of those teams have 32 wins, right? And then Nashville with 31. St. Louis has played 55 games, where all the other teams have played the same number of games, with the exception of Colorado playing one more. Here's the thing, though. I think St. Louis all day is a better team than Dallas and Nashville. Okay?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. I think where St. Louis's problem comes in is with Minnesota, because it always just seems like that set of games is always very difficult for either St. Louis to win or get on top of. And I have a feeling if somehow these guys potentially are going to be fighting it out, that's just kind of how I see it. You know what I mean? Because I think St. Louis is that better team. I think they're approaching that next level of, you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I agree. I think Minnesota's ascending, where St. Louis is always that contending, good culture team. Berube has everybody doing the most you can get out of them. I think somebody they need to have step up more. Your fourth line there has a very good fourth line face-off winner in Tyler Bozak. Not great on his other end anymore because he's slower now. But Sundqvist, that's a bigger guy. And then you have, I would put Logan Brown there because he's played well for the Thunder.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And he's been very good for them in 18 games. He's been solid this year, but he's been good in the handful of games he's played with St. Louis, where you need to add, in order to beat Minnesota, because they have some size like the Folignos, the Greenway, the Duhamis, you need to have some guys that are going to pound you a little bit. And I think having a Logan Brown in there with Oscar Sundqvist, that would help them once they get to that point. But their team, I mean, their top three lines are some of the best in the league when it comes to top three.
Exactly.
In terms of production.
Exactly.
So like that goes a long way, because once I said one of, I think it's actually the top in the league from the top three lines in terms of combined point. And then you also can push it with Krug, and Colton Branco even has 22 points this year. So you got guys that are great on both ends. Nico Mikula has been a huge addition for them that they drafted way back in 2015 at the 127th pick. they probably envision him being a solid, put in the lineup, big defenseman that does all things right. I think they envision him almost playing 20 minutes a night and being a perfect partner for Colton Parayko. So that's been a nice thing to come in for them. So their team, I think, just because they have the experience, if the big thing is Jordan Bennington. If Jordan Bennington can hone it in more, because I like Billy Huso, but Billy Huso doesn't have playoff experience.
Yeah, so he's been the man though. But he's been the man though for this year.
Yeah, but how many times have we seen a guy be the man, like David Rittich years ago, who's not good now, but years ago doing really good for the Flame, and then they immediately went to Mike Smith in the playoffs because of the playoff experience. That's why I would say Dallas is probably going to go to Holtby, which I don't know if I would agree with that decision when it comes to shove, but that's usually what teams tend to do. Huso's been great. He might be able to pick it up in the postseason and keep carrying them, but you don't have the experience with Huso. Bennington won the cup, but he hasn't finished.
I agree with you 100% on that, man. I agree with you 100%. And look, I don't even think we really even need to talk that much about Colorado because, I mean, really?
You had them at
number one?
You guys have
number one? Yeah. They're number one team in the league. Here's what I don't want any one of these two teams. I don't want Carolina or Colorado to get the President's Trophy. You know what I mean? Because whoever gets the President's Trophy usually doesn't historically, get the other trophy, right? But I really think that Colorado has a shot at getting to 60 games this year, of winning 60 games this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're at 40, 56. We talked about that last week, and they're at 39 or 56. Carolina, I gave Colorado the slight nod. So, yeah, I would agree. They both have a chance. I still think Colorado has a little bit of a
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Gosh, that team is just so stacked. Their power play is so good. Their penalty kill, not the greatest. But when you're scoring almost 4 points a game, I mean, they're up there with Florida, as far as yeah, you know what I mean, as far as points per game.
The other side we don't think of with Giroux. Teams are more. Everyone's thinking about it more from what offense he adds to your team. Giroux's also really solid defensively and is on a PK a lot of times.
Exactly.
So if you're going to someone like Colorado, he's probably also going to be a focal point of their PK because their PK, like you said, is one of the biggest weaknesses.
Yes.
So that he can become even maybe their main PK center, and then you kind of have him, and then you have everybody else doing the offensive thing, and he might not produce as many points as he did here, but he kind of settles into a role and still produces, but really shuts down people in the PK and kind of has a different role, obviously, than he had in Philadelphia.
So that's where that was one of the rumors of where Claude Giroux might potentially go as far as the trade is and all that kind of stuff. But look, here's the thing. Colorado doesn't need anybody, and quite frankly, for a trade to happen with Philadelphia, they don't have any number one draft picks for Colorado for this next year. So that means that players are going to have to come back.
It all depends. Also, they do have for 2023, though, so you could just move 2023 supposed to be
right
in most people's generational draft, so you could backtrack, get players with it, and then get a pick for next year's draft, whoever the
I'm with you. Cool. Well, Joe, man, I'll tell you what, we've had another great show. Why don't you give the folks a quick little update here about what's been going on here with Major League Baseball? I know they've canceled a slew of games, but if you could just give us a quick wrap-up here about what potentially is going on with Major League Baseball, and is there any chance they're going to be baseball this season?
Well, the earliest they moved the spring training back to, should probably be moved back again if they don't get it going, was the 18th. They canceled the first two series, but I think they announced after that they were going to, since that they canceled more of the season because they didn't reach a deal yesterday either. So it's going to come to a point where I've listened to a lot of stuff from both ends, but I think at this point, it's more the owners. This is my own opinion, but the owners are locking it up because, yes, we should have talked. They should have talked, like some people say, and people I really like watching on YouTube that have followed it have done stuff really well. Nobody talked for the first 6 weeks, but you also have to say the reason they didn't talk for the first 6 weeks is this is because the players wanted to talk, and around the holiday time, the league was kind of just saying, well, that's good for you. Shut the heck up, and we're going to enjoy the holiday. So, like, you didn't really have that option there. So I think when that comes into it, we have to take that into account, where the big problem the players have is they did give them a bonus pool for, like, pre-arbitration players so they can make more money sooner. But they wanted the pool at like 80-something million. They offer 30-something. So, like, that's a pretty big gap. They
pretty
did
big
raise
gap, I would say.
and salary from $575K maybe to $700K for the lowest average annual a guy can get once he's in the majors. The only issue with that is everybody looks at that more from how big of an increase that was. Well, great. The problem is baseball doesn't have a hard cap. It has an artificial salary cap, which is the luxury tax. And guess what sport the players get paid the least still as the minimum average salary? Baseball, because most sports are $720K up or $750K up or whatever for their minimum
salaries.
Salary.
Yeah.
And the worst part, this is the kicker with baseball. In practice squads, you make a decent amount of money. It's above 30-something K if you're a good practice. And then in G League, you make above 30-something K. In minor league hockey, you make something K all the way up to some of the best player, I think, in the ECHL gets paid 70-something. So, like, you make pretty good money, where in the MILB, you get paid 8K to 14, where, to put that into perspective for people, the U.S. poverty line in most states is about 12.8. So in baseball, you have to work. It's not like other sports. You can just kind of play the minor leagues and still have a life and do other things. Some baseball players work 3, 4 different jobs, and that's why I love listening to on the John Boy Media guys that started out of the garage from college. They have a lot of different stuff that they have different players on, and they talk from the perspective of, like, how you have to go through all that. Barstool has some players that are minor leaguers that have podcasts. Those are good people to listen to because they are the roots guys that really get screwed by it. The Harpers of the world, the Trout, they all have good opinions on it, but they're obviously not the ones getting screwed by it. They're the ones, though, that have to, at the same time, give to the young guys, which is not how it should work. Like, star players are the ones that actually tend to support the minor league system in baseball more than the league. Where, like, if I was a star player like Harper on a team, I would go, man, this guy's only getting paid $8,000 a year. Let me throw him 20K. And then, like, you would just write him a 20K check. So then he got paid 28K for that year, where 20 of it was from you and a much lesser percent was from the team. So it's like, that's not something. It's great that star players do that, and it's a great brotherhood that they do that, but they shouldn't have to. And that's the point that players are arguing, which is why, yes, the players agreed to this and they screwed up with the past CBA, but that's why it's taking so long, because baseball, the owners make by far than any other league the most revenue compared to the players. NBA is very much a players' league. NFL is more split. And then baseball, hockey's getting more split. It was more an owners' league, and then they kind of started pooling it more split, where baseball is really towards the owners. And that's why the players have tried to get it, where baseball is trying to still cut more, where they cut some of the minor league stuff, right? And now they're trying to still cut other stuff, where they're trying to cut jobs because they want to have the robot umps now, which the MLBPA doesn't want. Well, now you're that's a more economic thing for you, because yes, you're paying for the software and everything, but you're not paying for manpower, someone getting sick, having to pay for somebody else to come in. Like, you don't have to worry about all that other stuff. You just have to worry about the technology working. So baseball, for me, the big issue is, and this is the thing I'll close on, where it's why it annoys me. And I mean Major League Baseball. Minor League Baseball, I still love everything about it, and they're still playing this year. So go to the Reading Phillies, go to Lehigh, go to whatever your minor league city team is, and enjoy that no matter what happens with the MLB. But
Exactly.
Major League Baseball, I think, is the cheapest of all four major sports. If they won't give anything. Where even in hockey, when we were in a lockout and it looked bad, eventually the owners gave.
Yeah.
Where in football, eventually they caved on some stuff. In baseball, it's just like,
they don't care.
We'll give you $5 million. Meanwhile, there was a $70 million gap, and it's like, oh yeah, that's gonna fix everything. That's like offering you, if you want $25K for your car, I'm like, well, I'll give you 10. No, okay, how about 15?
Yeah, no, still not quite there yet. Keep going.
Yeah. It's like
or no, it's like you give them $7 million and then you divide it up between 60 million people. So you end up getting like $1.25.
The only good thing the league has done during this entire lockout, and the PA, because it's not, the MLB PA is at fault too for allowing Scott Boras to get as involved as he has, to be able to kind of push things a certain way, so they didn't agree to a deal and yada yada. Which part of that's because he's on the player's side, and I agree with him from some standpoints of they shouldn't have agreed to that deal because it wasn't good for the players. But at the same time, as an agent, you shouldn't be strong arming people so a deal is not agreed upon in the dawning hours, which is what the rumors are and the reports are that Scott Boras did and has done in the past with different things.
Oh, really?
But that's why I think baseball, in order to save it, they need to just come together soon, because the MLB has become more and more of a background sport for people, where it's just going to keep going that way, especially now. You have minor league towns that care more about minor league baseball than they care about the pros. So if they're still going on, that's in their face. You also have a deal now with ESPN for college baseball. People are going to get baseball at different levels. If you take the MLB, they might just say, well, forget the MLB. I'm just going to watch the different levels
whatever,
of baseball. For me to watch that, because MILB TV is significantly cheaper than MLB. And all that stuff. So that's why I think they got to do it quickly. Some of the ideas they put in place, I don't think are as helpful as they think it's going to be. Like, because the pitch clock, they have to implement it. They have to actually use it. They had a pitch clock already. No one cares.
Right.
So it's one of those things, like, how when you always get a 2 to 3 second grace, especially if you're a good quarterback with the delay of game. Well, you'll be sitting there as a fan, and you're like, it's at 0. And then, they're saying, 3 seconds later, and the play will fly. There's no play. Where that's pretty much the pitch clock, except for sometimes you literally have a pitcher like this for a full 15 seconds after the clock is on. Then he goes into his windup, and you're like, if you put it that, that's what'll make it move quicker, because. I mean, I grew up loving baseball my entire life, and baseball and hockey have been my main sports, with football as a third and basketball in there. And then during different parts of my life, I've watched more soccer, but lately not as much. But baseball has to find a way to get it as fun as it was when I was younger, watching the 08 run to the World Series, watching the 04 Dave Roberts steal and the ridiculous stuff with the Boston Red Sox. They got to get it back to that level of having more excitement, where now it's too many strikeouts, too much non-action moments, and games that are 4.5 hours. The retention span of people for a slower sport for 4.5 hours for most is not going to be that high.
Exactly.
Like, even hockey, 4.5 hours. That's the only reason they have shutouts. Because they don't want there to be 17 overtimes in the regular season, because in the playoffs, you're going to be interested in if it keeps going because it's the playoffs. But if it's a Wednesday night and you have work the next day and the Flyers are playing the Capitals and it's the 8th overtime at 3 a.m., well, you might be going, okay, well, I should probably get some sleep. But there's a different gauge there. That's why I think baseball's in a very bad spot, and they have to fix it now because the minor leagues, I see their marketing. I've been paying attention to it. They're taking great advantage of it, putting stuff out there saying, we're still here. Come to us. Come college baseball.
See,
Exactly. That deal with the ESPN. They're taking great advantage of it.
Good.
That is, and I love that for both college baseball and MILB as a fan of the game as a whole. But the MLB has to realize that, and that's going to really hurt them.
Exactly.
If they don't wake up.
I'm hearing you, man. I'm hearing you, dude. And it's just a shame to see, the national pastime just get tossed around like that. And it just, every year it just seems to get worse and worse. You know what I mean? Like, people just don't seem to watch or care about Major League Baseball. And it was the national pastime for so long. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, listen,
Joe,
you
watch it. Than you do now, though, Steel. This should be my last question to you. Chris Rose said this on his Rose Rotation show. Baseball, it's not like changing the whole game, but it's going to take, I think, somebody, and I completely agree with you, that changes the mode again to I'm going to draft and develop guys that are great in the gap, great at running the bases, great at always picking up the extra base, not thinking as much about, oh, let me just stay here because we're it's home run ball, and just doubles off the wall, type of style. I think it is going to take a team. Like the Rays still do that and teams still do that, but it's going to take a team that's really noticeable, like a bigger market team, like the Red Sox or something, to go back to that and say, we're going to start drafting like that with power, like the J.D. Martinez's around these guys. But we want the Shane Victorinos of the world. We want the Michael Bournes of the world. We want the Kenny Loftons of the world. We want the Guam Pierres of the world. We want the Ricky Hendersons of the world that can run and do it all. Like, we don't just want a guy to do one end of what Ricky did, which was hit home runs and drive in people. We want them to still do the base stealing it. So, like, that's why
I remember watching him.
Exciting. That's why I think it's got less exciting in a sense, too.
I'm with you. I remember watching Ricky Henderson run bases too, man. Jeez. Well, listen, buddy, you are the beat writer for the Reading Royals. You also write for FlyersNittyGritty.com. Why don't you tell the folks where we can find you, where we can get you, where we can get all your great articles and stuff?
Well, you just said it, Flyers Nitty Gritty, for more coverage on hockey and other sports, Sports Fanatic News, PHANATIC News on YouTube. And then also here at the Great JB and Steel show that we put out at noon on Tuesdays, and then usually I put it out in Raw on my Sports Fanatic News channel a little bit later or early on Wednesday. But I thank you all for joining us again. Please continue to hit that subscribe button to keep us growing here at the SteelFlyers page, as well as at Sports Fanatic News. Thanks again for a great episode, everybody, and I hope you have a great week and enjoy all the great sports action and leading up to the draft, the deadline for the NHL, draft for the NFL. That we'll talk about more in next week's episode. So stay tuned for that as well.
For sure, man. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for checking us out. I'm SteelFlyers. You can find me on Twitter at SteelFlyers52. Also, you can check out all the great shows from the SteelFlyers Sports Network, from Off the Wall Hockey, the Hockey Writers Inc., to the great Perlo Wisdom and the great Peyton on the Radio, and, of course, Sports Fanatic News. Check us out on the web at www.steelflyers.com. We will see you guys all on the next time on the JB and Steel Show. Thanks for watching.